Good afternoon everyone, how are you doing? It's me, I'm back, and today I just wanted to go over a couple of points from the last video that I had to sort of skim over for time and boringness. So this video is going to be a little bit more freeform to just cover a couple of the points that I wanted to cover in the last video, but I needed to edit it down so that it was somewhat tractable. So this video is going to be a little bit more freeform. I'm just covering a few key points that I wanted to cover in that last video. So the first point that I wanted to talk about, and I alluded to it in the video, is about the user's emotional journey and how the emotional journey differs between visible and invisible cues. I talked about the user's emotional journey degrading quickly in an invisible cue, and that is certainly true. It's actually slightly the opposite for a visible cue, in that the user starts out being somewhat frustrated by being in a queue. They hear how far down the queue they are, and for them it feels like it's going to be a long time. So most abandons will happen very quickly for a visible queue. Like if you're walking past Splash Mountain and it's like 3 hours to the front of the queue, you might just not go at all. However, as they move through the queue, they feel like they're making progress and they feel like they're getting closer to the front of the queue, which actually improves their mood over time. For an invisible queue, you start out assuming that you're going to be dealt with quite quickly, and then your emotional journey degrades very fast. So how do you decide whether a visible or an invisible queue is right for you? Well, there's several factors to making that decision, and this is the second point that I wanted to touch on. Firstly, it depends how long your queue is. If it's a short queue, just make it an invisible queue, because there is an expense, there is a cost to having to do the calculation for how long that queue time is going to be. So cost is certainly one factor. The other major factor is how calculable the wait time is, and that depends on your business and your product. If your business is fielding very similar queries, you kind of know how long each query is going to take. The classic example is something like a roller coaster, where you know how long the ride takes, you know how many people can get on the ride in one go, you know the physical length of the queue, and you can make an estimate as to how tightly people pack into that queue. So you know distance-wise how far people are going to have to wait. However, if it's a call center, you might have different levels of complexity of query, making it difficult to work out how long someone's going to be in the queue, but you can tell them where they are in the queue. Now, the tension there is around how many call handlers do you have, because no one wants to hear that they're number 70 in the queue. But if you have 50 call handlers, then you go back to being able to present it potentially as a time, because across 50 calls, even if you have a lot of variability for how long your queries take, it'll average out over those 50 people. So you can say, oh yeah, it's going to be 2 or 3 minutes in the queue. So that kind of covers how it's not necessarily the case that visible queues are always better than invisible queues. They certainly aren't always better. I also talked very briefly about the asynchronous queue. And this is a sort of subset of the invisible queue, but is kind of its own thing. And that's where you get put into a queue, but you can go off and do other things in the meantime. So examples of this in the physical world are going to be when you pre-book to go on a ride at a theme park at a particular time, or if you've ever been to a Magic GP, you can sign up for a draft, say, and you need to wait for 8 people to sign up for that draft. So what they give is they give you a little buzzer which beeps at you when your pod is ready to fire. In the virtual space, things like callbacks, when you press a button to arrange to get called back. So asynchronous queues are very good because they allow people to go off and do other things, but the downside to those is they're totally unsuitable if someone needs attention early. They need to get through to a doctor's reception or something like that. Most people will want to wait in the queue rather than get a call back. So those were the 3 major points that I wanted to just clarify from the last video. Asynchronous queuing, the user's emotional journey between a visible and an invisible queue, and some of the factors that go into deciding whether a visible or invisible queue is right for your business. So very theoretical stuff, not related to Mass Effect at all. So I kind of just wanted to take that content out and just put it in a separate video. So this is just going to be a very short one. But if you found that interesting, leave a like and a comment below. But other than that, I'll catch up with you guys soon.